Well, I I was at the right age when Pearl Harbor happened, and I just remember real well Roosevelt's speech, which was one of his greatest. And I knew what was going to happen to me. My future, I had no point in having any long-range plans. I was going to school down at Norman, and it worked out that way. They let us finish the semester, and then you was ready for be drafted, and I didn't want to be drafted into I wanted to get into the Air Force if I could, if I had a choice. And fortunately, they lowered some of the requirements to be an Air Force pilot, and I took the test and I got in. I was in the 9th Air Force. In the 9th Air Force and the 8th Air Force were both in England. The 8th Air Force flew the long-range missions deeper into the continent. The 9th Air Force assignment, or its task, was to do the short-range stuff, and that ended up bombing the coastline of the continent of Europe and harassing all of that operation, the railroad yards, the marshalling yards, and strafing and doing that kind, preparing for the invasion. It was to harass the Germans, for them getting their installations in for the war. They knew the invasion was coming and they were doing that. But our job was to harass the German operation along the coastline. And then after that, we moved up to Belgium. And I only flew about 3 flights off of an airstrip in Belgium. And I got shot down on the 3rd flight, and our mission was to strafe a 109 airfield in Germany. The 109s were attacking the bombers so bad. We were losing, our country was losing, they were excessives, and so to cripple an airplane on the ground was just as good as shooting one out of the air. And as a matter of fact, if it's shot up, it's just as disabled as one that's crashed, you know. And I got shot down on that mission. We never did get to on account of weather, we never did get to the target. And the group, our commander, Captain Hatch, he aborted the mission, and then he asked for volunteers in his flight. So it was for him and his wingman, and then the other 2 of us, and we all volunteered to go in on what we call opportunities, mission of opportunities, targets of opportunities. And the flak was so heavy where we were, I knew that I could never pull up. I was flying tail end Charlie, and I knew that I could never get through all that flak as heavy as it was. It was a regular fire show. So I stayed down on the deck, and I flew about 10 miles inland, and I was in a wooded area, and I thought this was the time to pull up. And as I pulled up, it turned out there was a German unit bivouacking in there that had been down on the front, and they had one anti-aircraft gun, and I was climbing as hard as I could climb to get away, but he got me, you know. I got a hit, and whenever I got hit, I got a direct hit, and immediately fire was smoke was in the cockpit. Then right behind the smoke was the fire, and I had to bail out. There was no second guessing or anything. And fortunately, I didn't hit the tail boom on a P-38, which has killed many a pilot trying to bail out, but somehow, I don't know if it was divine intervention or what, but I missed it. And I could see all the soldiers, German soldiers, coming all around me, so there was no chance of escaping. I landed in a turnip, I think it was a turnip field, but the vegetation was about 18 inches high. And I just laid there, and I hit the ground hard. And I just laid there because I knew if I got up, one of the German soldiers would take a pot shot at me and I'd be a goner. And a German officer and his top sergeant, the officer had his pistol out and right like this, and the German sergeant had his rifle, and the two of them come up on me, and I didn't speak German, but I think he said "roust," and I knew what he meant. But by laying there, I know that I saved my own life right there, laying in that vegetation before I got up. And of course, then the whole crowd of German soldiers come around and they stripped me of everything I had for souvenirs themselves. But I was fortunate to be captured by the German army instead of by the civilians or the SS troopers, because if you got caught by them, most likely our intelligence told us we were done for. Well, it was, to tell you the truth, when I bailed out of that airplane on fire, my mind was as clear than it is right now, I'll tell you the truth. But I thought it was the end, you know what I mean? I thought I was at the end of the road. But when I got on the ground, and like I told you that a while ago, and this German officer took me to a little old, I'm gonna call it a county jail, you know what I'm talking about. But I was just thought, well, I'm in enemy territory, and I don't have a friend here, and I knew it. So I reconciled myself to the fact that I was captured, and really, I didn't realize that I was in as much shock as I was in, because I didn't eat for, I'm gonna say, about 4 days. And the first time, the only time they offered was something. About the second or third day, in one of the little jails, they didn't offer us anything to eat, really. We didn't have anything to eat. They opened a keg out in the courtyard, and it said, if you want that, you go out there and eat. And there was another prisoner there with me that I hadn't met, but he was in that little old jail there. And we went out there, and it was sauerkraut. It was a barrel, like about a 50-gallon barrel of sauerkraut. Well, I didn't eat any of it anyway. But that was the most thing. I was really in some kind of a shock and didn't even realize it because I didn't eat. But finally, in about 6 days, it took about 6 days to get me to Frankfurt. That was in southern Germany, and that was the Germans' interrogation center. And I was in there several days to be interrogated by their officers. And that was quite an experience, in as much as, in wartime, they taught us that we was only to give your name, rank, and serial number, and no other information other than that. And this big, superior-looking German officer, to try to make you look wimpy, he said, well, I'm gonna tell you something. He said, your airplane is crashed, and he said, I can take you out and have you shot, and nobody in the Geneva Convention will know the difference, because your airplane is crashed. And what he was doing was threatening me, see. My folks was notified by the War Department that I was missing in action. And then, I'm gonna say, within a week, 10 days, something like that, some source, I don't know where it came from, in Germany, what do you want to call a little, what do they call those radio deals that back then? I can't tell you, but anyway, somehow they flashed the news that I was a prisoner of war on account of their record. But it come out of Germany. And it came, and a guy picked it up out in Oregon. He picked it up on his radio satellite or whatever it is, and he sent the telegram to my folks. And that's the way that happened.
Oh, wow. So it's probably the, like that
What we
range radio, what do they call
what,
it? Ham radio? Ham radio.
ham, that's it. It was ham radio. That's what I couldn't think of it. But the source, we never know where it came from in Germany. But a guy picked it up out there, and that was the good news for my family. When I got after the interrogation center, it took about a week for me to cross Germany from southern Germany, go right through Berlin, went through Berlin, and to this camp. It was Stalag Luft 1, that's Barth, Germany, and that's 200 miles straight north of Berlin on the Baltic Sea. And that's where it was. But there was a room not much larger than this room right here we're in. And there was 20 men in the room, and we had bunks, 20 men to the room. And yes, you did develop some fellowship with those 20 because you were together 24 hours a day. I mean, it wasn't that you ever had a break or anything. So you had your friends, and it was the room was divided into 3 groups. So I don't know whether it was 6 and 6 and 7 or whatever like that. And we had a made brick fireplace that they had made, and at 11:30 one group could do their eating together, their group, and then at 12 o'clock the other group could have the access to our fire, and then the other group. But yeah, we had a lot of comradeship in there, but there was no horseplay when roll calls and things like that were called. And you had a roll call in the morning and you had a roll call at night, and the German did it, and there was no horseplay. The Russians were coming, and we could hear their guns. I'm going to say they were 90 miles away crossing a big river. As a matter of fact, I was trying to look up the name of the river on the Baltic Sea. That's northern Germany. And the Russians were coming that way. And it took them about 10 days to finally cross that river. The Germans fought them so hard there. But they slowly came, and the Russians got there. Oh, man, I can't remember the dates exactly now. But when they came in, that night, sometime during the night, the German guards all left the towers, and they ran for their lives then, you know. Now, the Russians were dressed just like you and me. They weren't in uniforms. They were wild, but every one of them had a machine gun around his neck, and he had his own food in his pouches and stuff like that. It was stinking fish. You couldn't stand it to be around them, but they were very friendly to us. And the first thing they asked is, "What do you need?" And they said, "Well, we'd love to have some meat to eat." Our people, they went out and scavenged, and this is called scorched earth logistics. They went out and rounded up about 50 head of white-faced cattle, Holstein cattle, you know, beautiful cattle. Come in there and they just slaughtered them. For us, that was very wasteful, but they did that. And then, in a few days, they had a USO show come. I could not believe this, and that was the best US show I ever saw in my life. It was unbelievable how those Russians could dance, sing, and acrobatics, the things they could do. But it was one of the best USO, and I've seen a lot of them, and they were good. And they put on that show, but they was really good in the liberation. Wow. Took about a week for the Air Force to get B-17s in there, and they got B-17s in there, and we marched to an airfield. And when we marched to that airfield, they loaded us in them B-17s. They had planks in the bomb bays, and we just got in and sat on them planks. Nobody had a parachute, but they were glad to get out of there. And they flew us to Reims, France. And Reims was Eisenhower's headquarters at that time in France. And it was a great sight to be in friendly territory and see all those beautiful airplanes that was parked there, and all in American hands. So it was a monumental change.